He left you here? The cowboy's voice cut through the dying light like a promise wrapped in dust. She stood there, abandoned on that empty platform, clutching a letter that had shattered her world just hours before. The man she'd traveled 800 miles to marry had vanished like morning mist, leaving her with nothing but a crumpled note and fading hope. But Cole Turner wasn't the kind of man who left wounded souls to the wolves. "Then you're coming home with me." Those 7 words would change everything. Stay until the end to see how this abandoned woman found her true destiny, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Hollow Bend's weathered train platform, painting everything in shades of amber and despair. Abigail Monroe stood motionless beside the empty ticket booth, her navy traveling dress already coated with the fine Oklahoma dust that seemed to settle on everything in this godforsaken town. The leather suitcase at her feet, the one her mother had given her with trembling hands just 3 weeks ago in Boston, now felt like an anchor threatening to drag her straight down into the earth. In her hands, crumpled and reread so many times the ink had begun to smear with her tears, was the letter that had destroyed everything. "Miss Monroe, circumstances have changed. My situation is no longer suitable for marriage. The arrangement we discussed must be considered void. Do not come to Hollow Bend. There is nothing here for you now. M. Blake." But she had come anyway. The letter had arrived the morning she was set to depart, delivered to her boarding house by a boy who couldn't have been more than 12, who'd thrust it into her hands and vanished before she could even ask where it came from. She'd stood in her small rented room, surrounded by the few belongings she'd packed for her new life, and made a decision that seemed insane even to her practical Boston mind. She went anyway. What choice did she have? She'd already given up her position as a seamstress at Mrs. Aldridge's shop. She'd already said goodbye to the few friends she had, their faces mixture of envy and pity as they'd wished her well on her mail-order bride journey to the untamed West. She'd already spent the last of her savings on the train ticket. Her small room had already been rented to another girl, a factory worker with rough hands and desperate eyes, just like Abigail had once been. There was no going back, only forward into whatever hell awaited her in this dust-choked corner of nowhere. The train that had brought her, the iron beast that had carried her across rivers and plains, through towns that grew progressively smaller and rougher, had departed 20 minutes ago. She'd watched it disappear into the distance, carrying with it the last connection to everything she'd known. The station master, an elderly man with tobacco-stained whiskers, had locked up the ticket office without so much as a glance in her direction. He'd seen women like her before, she supposed. Mail-order brides, Harvey girls, desperate souls fleeing something or chasing dreams that usually turned to dust. Now the platform was empty. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath in the oppressive heat. A tumbleweed, she'd only seen them in drawings before, rolled lazily down the main street visible from the station. The wooden buildings looked like they were barely clinging to existence, their paint peeled by sun and scoured by wind. The saloon across the way had started its evening business early. Tinny piano music drifted out along with rough laughter and the smell of cheap whiskey. Abigail closed her eyes, trying to summon the courage that had brought her this far. She was 24 years old, unmarried, and until 3 weeks ago, resigned to spending her life in service to others, mending their clothes, fixing their lives, never having one of her own. When Mason Blake's advertisement had appeared in the Boston matrimonial paper, it had seemed like divine intervention. Established rancher in Oklahoma Territory seeks refined woman of good character for marriage. Must be willing to embrace frontier life. Companionship and security offered to the right woman. She'd responded immediately, her hand shaking as she wrote her letter by candlelight in her cramped room. She'd been honest, perhaps too honest, about her circumstances. She was an orphan, raised in a Catholic charity house until she was 14, then put into service. She had no family, no prospects, no dowry to offer. But she could read and write, she could sew, she could manage a household, and she was willing to work hard for a chance at a real life. His response had come within 2 weeks. The letter had been formal, almost stiff, but it contained everything she needed to hear. Yes, he would have her. Yes, he understood her situation. Yes, she should come to Hollow Bend, and they would be married by the local minister. He'd even sent $20 for the train fare. More than generous, she'd thought at the time. They'd exchanged 3 more letters. His were always brief, discussing practical matters, the ranch, the weather, the kind of life she should expect. She tried to read affection between the lines, tried to imagine the man behind the careful handwriting. She'd convinced herself that love could grow, that respect and partnership could be enough. She'd been so desperate to believe in the possibility of belonging somewhere, to someone, that she'd ignored the coldness in his words, the lack of any real warmth or personality in his letters. And now this. Abandoned before she'd even arrived. Cast aside like a dress with a torn hem, not worth the effort to mend. The sun was sinking lower now, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and red. It would be dark soon. Abigail had exactly $3.17 left in her purse. The letter had said nothing about returning her train fare. She didn't even know where Mason Blake was. If he was real at all, or if this had all been some cruel joke. The station master had claimed no knowledge of anyone by that name when she'd asked, though his eyes had shifted away too quickly, suggesting he was lying. She should cry. Part of her knew that. Part of her expected the tears to come, the breakdown, the complete collapse of the fragile composure she'd maintained since receiving the letter. But the tears wouldn't fall. She felt hollow, carved out, like all the emotion had simply drained away, leaving her a shell standing on a platform in the middle of nowhere with no past to return to and no future to claim. A door slammed somewhere down the street. Horses whinnied in a nearby stable. Life continued around her, indifferent to her crisis. She bent down, gripping the handle of her suitcase, trying to decide what to do next. The hotel, if this town even had one, would take what little money she had. Then what? She had no skills that would serve her here, no connections, no... "Ma'am, you waiting on someone?" The voice startled her so badly she nearly dropped the suitcase. She spun around to find a man standing a respectful distance away, hat in his hands. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work rather than leisure. His face was weathered by sun and wind, lines etched around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. Those eyes, a striking shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds breaking, held genuine concern. His clothes marked him as a working man. Worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, scuffed leather boots that had seen countless miles. His hat, now held respectfully in his hands, was a traditional cowboy Stetson, sweat-stained around the band. Everything about him spoke of the frontier, rough, practical, real. This was what she'd imagined when she dreamed of the West, though she'd pictured herself safe beside such a man, not standing alone and abandoned. She couldn't find words. How did you explain this situation to a stranger? How did you admit you'd been thrown away before you'd even arrived? He seemed to understand without explanation. His eyes dropped to the suitcase, then to the crumpled letter still clutched in her other hand, then to her face, taking in what must be obvious devastation barely held in check. "He left you here?" The question was gentle, but it cut through her composure like a knife. She managed a nod, not trusting her voice. The man's jaw tightened. In the fading light, she could see anger flash across his features, not directed at her, but on her behalf. It was such an unexpected reaction that it nearly undid her completely. This stranger, this man who owed her nothing, was angry for her sake. "Then you're coming home with me." The words hung in the air between them. Abigail's first instinct was to refuse, to step back, to remember every warning she'd ever heard about strange men and women alone. But something in his voice, in his eyes, told her this wasn't a threat. It was exactly what it sounded like. An offer of help, simple and direct. "I can't," she heard herself say, though her voice sounded distant, strange. "I don't even know you." He nodded, as if he'd expected that response. "Name's Cole Turner. I've got a ranch about 8 miles north of here. Small place, nothing fancy, but it's got a roof that doesn't leak and a stove that works. You're welcome to it, just until you figure out what you want to do next." He paused, then added, "No strings, no expectations. Just help, if you'll take it." "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why would you help me?" Cole turned his hat in his hands, considering the question. When he looked up at her again, there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. A depth of understanding, of shared pain, that suggested he knew exactly what it felt like to be abandoned. "Because I know what it's like to have nowhere to go," he said simply. "And because leaving you here would make me no better than the coward who wrote that letter." A gust of wind swept across the platform, carrying with it the smell of the coming night, dust and sage, and the faint promise of rain that probably wouldn't come. Abigail looked around at the dying town, at the saloon where rough men were gathering, at the gathering darkness, at her complete lack of options. "Ma'am," Cole continued, his voice steady and patient, "you got no roof, no horse, and no daylight left. I ain't offering trouble, just a warm meal and a dry bed. Whatever brought you here, whatever that letter says, it don't change the fact that you need help right now, and I'm offering it." She studied his face, trying to find deception, trying to see the angle, the trap. But all she saw was sincerity and an unexpected kindness that seemed out of place in this harsh land. Maybe she was a fool. Maybe this was another mistake in a life that seemed to be built on them. But what choice did she have? "All right," she said finally, her voice stronger than she felt. "Thank you, Mr. Turner." "Cole," he corrected, settling his hat back on his head. "Just Cole." He reached for her suitcase and she let him take it, too exhausted to protest. "My wagon's just over here. It's not much of a ride, but we should get going before full dark." She followed him down the platform steps and across the dusty street to where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to two patient-looking horses. The wagon was well maintained, practical rather than fancy, with a seat worn smooth by use. Cole lifted her suitcase into the back with ease, then turned to help her up. His hand was rough with calluses, warm and steady. She gripped it, allowing him to help her onto the seat, acutely aware that she was trusting a complete stranger with her safety, possibly her life. Everything she'd been taught screamed that this was dangerous, foolish, the kind of decision that ruined women. But those same rules and proprieties had brought her here, abandoned and alone. Maybe it was time to trust her instincts instead. Cole climbed up beside her, keeping a respectful distance on the seat. He released the brake and gave a gentle click of his tongue, and the horses started forward at an easy pace. The wagon creaked as it rolled away from the station, away from the town, toward the open prairie that stretched endlessly in every direction. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Abigail kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, acutely aware of the man beside her, of the vast emptiness around them, of how completely her life had shattered in the space of a single day. The sun was nearly gone now, leaving just a rim of gold on the western horizon. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, more stars than she'd ever seen in Boston, where gas lamps and smoke obscured the heavens. "If you don't mind me asking," Cole said eventually, his voice careful, "how'd you end up in Hollow Bend? It's not exactly on the way to anywhere." Abigail hesitated. Shame burned in her chest, but what did it matter now? He was already helping her. He might as well know the truth. "I came here to get married," she said quietly. "Or rather, I thought I was." She felt rather than saw him tense slightly. "Mail-order bride?" "Yes." The word felt like an admission of failure. "I answered an advertisement, a man named Mason Blake. He said he was a rancher, that he wanted a wife. We exchanged letters. He sent money for the train fare. It all seemed—" She trailed off, not knowing how to finish. "Real? Legitimate? Like an actual chance at happiness?" "And then he sent you that letter," Cole finished, understanding in his voice. "It came the morning I was supposed to leave. Told me not to come, that circumstances had changed." She laughed, a bitter sound. "I came anyway. I had nowhere else to go." Cole was quiet for a moment, the only sound the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves and the creak of the wagon. "Mason Blake," he said finally, and there was something dangerous in his tone. "I know the name." Abigail's head snapped toward him. "You do?" "He's not a rancher," Cole said, his jaw tight. He seemed to search for appropriate words. "He's a man who makes his living in cards and schemes. Got himself into debt with some men who don't take kindly to being cheated. Last I heard, he'd left town in a hurry about 3 weeks back. Guess he figured he'd solve his money problems by getting a bride to bring her dowry." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "But I told him I had nothing. No money, no family, no dowry." "Then I guess he found that out and decided you weren't worth his trouble. Cole's voice was hard. I'm sorry. That's a cruel thing to do to someone. Abigail felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't even that he'd wanted her. He'd wanted money she didn't have. She wasn't even worth a con man's time. The humiliation was almost worse than the abandonment. Hey, Cole said, and his voice had gentled again. That man's choices don't say anything about you. They say everything about him. You came all this way in good faith, ready to build a life with someone. That took courage. What he did, running off, leaving you stranded, that's cowardice, plain and simple. Courage or stupidity? Abigail asked, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. Courage, Cole said firmly. Stupidity would have been staying in a place that made you desperate enough to answer that advertisement in the first place. You wanted more for your life. Nothing stupid about that. They crested a small rise, and before them stretched more prairie, silver in the starlight. Abigail could see a faint glow in the distance. Lamplight from a window, she guessed. Cole's ranch. The sight of it, proof that shelter and safety were real and close, made her shoulders sag with relief she hadn't known she was holding back. That's home, Cole said, and there was unmistakable warmth in his voice. Not much to look at, maybe, but it's solid. As they drew closer, Abigail could make out the shape of a modest house, dark wood weathered by the elements but well maintained. There was a barn nearby, a corral with a few horses, and what looked like a chicken coop. Everything spoke of careful stewardship, of someone who took pride in what little he had. Cole brought the wagon to a stop near the house and jumped down, then came around to help her. This time, when she took his hand, some of the fear had eased. She let him steady her as she climbed down, her legs stiff from travel and emotion. I'll show you inside, he said, grabbing her suitcase. Get you settled. The house was small, just 3 rooms as far as she could tell, but it was clean and orderly in a way that surprised her. Most bachelor homes she'd heard of were disasters of unwashed dishes and unmade beds. But Cole's home, while simple, was well kept. The main rooms served as kitchen and living area, with a sturdy table, a few chairs, and a pot-bellied stove that radiated warmth. There were even curtains on the windows, plain, but clean and straight. Bedroom's through there, Cole said, nodding toward a door. It's yours while you're here. I'll bunk in the barn. I can't take your bed, Abigail protested automatically. You can and you will, Cole said, brooking no argument. I've slept in worse places than a hayloft, and there's a cot out there that suits me fine. Besides, he added with a slight smile, I'm up before dawn most days anyway. Easier to just roll out of the barn and get to work. He set her suitcase down near the bedroom door, then moved to the stove. Within minutes, he had a fire going and was pulling out supplies: bread, cheese, some cold meat, a jar of what looked like preserves. It's not fancy, he said, assembling a simple meal, but it'll do for tonight. Tomorrow I can make something more substantial. Abigail stood awkwardly in the center of the room, unsure what to do with herself. The unreality of the situation was crashing over her in waves. This morning she'd been on a train full of nervous anticipation about meeting her future husband. Now she was in a stranger's home, accepting charity from a man she'd known for less than an hour. Sit, Cole said gently, pulling out a chair for her. You look dead on your feet. She sank into the chair gratefully. Her body was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Cole placed a plate in front of her, then poured water from a pitcher into 2 tin cups. He took the seat across from her, maintaining that respectful distance that seemed to be natural to him. Eat, he encouraged. You'll feel better with something in your stomach. Abigail picked up the bread, realizing as she did that she hadn't eaten since early morning. The bread was good, fresh, and hearty. The cheese was sharp, the meat tender. Simple food, but prepared with care. She ate slowly, aware of Cole doing the same across from her, his presence somehow both strange and comforting. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Anything. Why are you really helping me? You don't know me. I could be anyone, a thief, a liar, anything. Cole considered this, taking a sip of water. I suppose you could be, he agreed, but I don't think you are. And even if you were, you'd still be a person in trouble, and I'd still be someone who could help. He paused. My mother used to say that the measure of a person wasn't in what they did when it was easy, but what they did when it would cost them something. Leaving you on that platform would have been easy, wouldn't have cost me a thing, but I would have known I did it, and I would have had to live with that. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. A shadow crossed Cole's face. She was. She passed about 5 years back. Fever took her quick. My father followed 6 months later. Folks said it was his heart, but I think he just couldn't stand to be without her. I'm sorry, Abigail said, and meant it. Appreciate that. Cole looked down at his hands, rough and scarred from ranch work. They built this place together, worked it together. After they were gone, I thought about leaving, but he gestured around the small house. This is their legacy. Feels wrong to abandon it. Abigail understood that. She'd never had a legacy, never had anything that was truly hers to keep or leave. The idea of it, of having a place so tied to love and memory that you couldn't bear to leave, was foreign and beautiful. They finished eating in companionable silence. Cole cleared the plates, refusing her offer to help. You've had a hell of a day, he said. Rest is what you need now. Everything else can wait until tomorrow. He showed her to the bedroom, which was small but clean, with a real bed covered in a quilt that looked handmade. There was a dresser with a washing basin and pitcher, and a small mirror on the wall, simple, but more than adequate. There's water in the pitcher, Cole said from the doorway. Fresh towels in the dresser. If you need anything else, I'll be in the barn. Just call out. Cole, she said, turning to face him. Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Don't need repayment, he said simply. Just need you to rest and heal. Everything else will sort itself out. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture so courtly it seemed at odds with his rough appearance. Good night, Miss Monroe. Abigail, she said, please, just call me Abigail. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face, making him look younger, less careworn. Good night, Abigail. After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Abigail stood in the small room, listening to his footsteps cross the main room, listening to the front door open and close, listening to the silence that followed. She was alone in a stranger's house, in a place she'd never been, with no plan and no prospects. But she was safe. She was sheltered. And for the first time since receiving that devastating letter, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could breathe. She changed into her nightgown, washed her face in the basin, and climbed into the bed. The mattress was firm but comfortable, the quilt heavy and warm. Through the small window she could see stars, thousands of them, scattered across the sky like diamonds spilled on black velvet. Tomorrow she would have to figure out what came next. Tomorrow she would have to face the reality of her situation, the impossibility of going back, and the uncertainty of going forward. Tomorrow she would have to be strong. But tonight, in this small room, in this stranger's house, she let herself feel the weight of everything that had happened. And finally, the tears came, silent and unstoppable, soaking into the pillow as she cried for the dreams that had died, for the future she'd never have, for the girl she'd been who'd believed a letter could change her life. Outside in the barn, Cole Turner lay on his cot, staring up at the shadowed rafters. He'd meant every word he'd said to her. He had helped because it was the right thing to do, because leaving her there would have haunted him, because his mother had raised him to be better than that. But there was another truth, one he hadn't voiced. When he'd seen her standing there on that platform, so clearly lost and alone, something in his chest had tightened. She'd looked like hope and heartbreak all wrapped up in one person, and he'd needed to do something to ease that pain in her eyes. He'd been alone for 5 years, managing the ranch by himself, talking to horses and cattle more than people, going to town only when necessary. He'd convinced himself he was fine with it, that he didn't need companionship, that the work and the land were enough. But seeing her tonight, sitting across from her at his table, watching her try to hold herself together with such fierce dignity, it had reminded him of what it felt like to have someone in his home, someone to talk to, someone to care about. Dangerous thoughts, he told himself. She was a woman in trouble, nothing more. She'd stay until she figured out her next move, and then she'd go, back east probably, to somewhere civilized where women like her belonged. This was just temporary charity, a good deed, nothing more. But as he closed his eyes, trying to find sleep, he couldn't quite silence the small voice in his head that whispered, What if she stays? He pushed the thought away. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. For now, it was enough that she was safe, that she was here, that he'd done the right thing. In the house, Abigail's tears eventually slowed, then stopped. Exhaustion pulled at her, dragging her toward sleep. Her last conscious thought was of Cole's voice. That man's choices don't say anything about you. Maybe he was right. Maybe Mason Blake's betrayal wasn't a reflection of her worth. Maybe she wasn't broken or worthless or too damaged for anyone to want. Maybe, just maybe, being abandoned on that platform hadn't been the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning. Dawn broke over the prairie in shades of pearl and gold, the kind of sunrise that made the whole world look freshly made. Abigail woke to unfamiliar sounds, roosters crowing, horses nickering, the distant lowing of cattle. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, and then it all came rushing back, the platform, the letter, Cole Turner's unexpected kindness. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from travel and emotion. Through the window, she could see the sun climbing over the horizon, painting the grasslands in brilliant light. It was beautiful in a way she hadn't expected, raw and vast and utterly different from the cramped streets of Boston. There was a soft knock at the door. "Miss Abigail, you awake?" "Yes," she called back, quickly finger-combing her hair into some semblance of order. "I've got coffee on and breakfast started," Cole said through the door. "Take your time, no rush." She heard his footsteps retreat and forced herself out of bed. The water in the pitcher was cool and clean. She washed her face, changed into one of her 2-day dresses, a simple gray cotton that had seen better days, and tried to prepare herself for whatever this day would bring. When she emerged from the bedroom, Cole was at the stove, working with the easy competence of someone who'd been cooking for himself for years. He looked up as she entered, and she was struck again by those storm cloud eyes, the genuine warmth in them. "Morning," he said. "Hope you like eggs. I've got chickens that are overachievers." "Eggs sound wonderful," she said, taking the same seat she'd occupied the night before. The table was already set with mismatched plates and cups, a jar of wildflowers in the center that definitely hadn't been there last night. The sight of them made something in her chest tighten. Cole brought over a pan of scrambled eggs and a plate of toast. "Not fancy, but it'll stick to your ribs." He poured coffee, strong and black, into her cup. "Sugar's there if you need it. No cream, I'm afraid. Haven't got a milk cow at the moment." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The eggs were good, cooked with butter and seasoned with something she couldn't quite identify. Herbs from a garden, maybe? The coffee was exactly what she needed, strong enough to chase away the last cobwebs of exhausted sleep. "I was thinking," Cole said, setting down his fork, "if you're up to it, you could help out around here for a bit. Nothing heavy, mending, maybe some cooking, tending the garden. I'm not much good at the domestic side of things, and it would give you something to do while you figure out your next step." Abigail looked at him carefully, trying to read his intentions. "You're already feeding me and housing me. I can't take payment for that too." "Wouldn't be payment," Cole said. "Would be partnership. I help you, you help me. Seems fair." He paused, then added, "Besides, I get the feeling you're not the kind of woman who sits idle well. Am I wrong?" She almost smiled. "No, you're not wrong." Then it settled. He stood, collecting the plates. "I've got to check on the cattle this morning, mend some fence. Should be back by noon. Make yourself at home. There's mending in that basket by the window if you want it, or you can just rest. Whatever suits you." After he left, Abigail sat at the table for a long moment, listening to the sounds of him preparing his horse, riding out. Then she stood and surveyed the small house with new eyes. If she was going to be here, even temporarily, she might as well make herself useful. The mending basket was overflowing with shirts that needed buttons, trousers with torn hems, socks that had seen better days. She settled into the chair by the window, where the light was best, and got to work. The familiar rhythm of needle and thread was soothing, something she could do without thinking, letting her mind wander. What was she going to do? That was the question that had no easy answer. She had a little money, but not enough to get back east. And even if she could, what would she go back to? Her room was rented to someone else. Mrs. Aldridge had surely filled her position by now. She had no family, no friends close enough to take her in. Boston had never really been home, just another place she'd existed, waiting for life to begin. But what life could she have here? Hollow Bend was barely a town. There was no dress shop that would need a seamstress, no households wealthy enough to need domestic help. Even if she could find work, where would she live? The saloon was the only boarding house she'd seen, and she knew what kind of work they'd offer a woman alone. She was trapped, not by walls or locked doors, but by circumstance and poverty and the simple fact that the world wasn't kind to women with nowhere to go. The morning passed in quiet work. She mended every piece in the basket, then moved on to cleaning, sweeping the floors, washing the dishes, organizing the small pantry. It felt good to be useful, to see the immediate results of her labor. By the time she heard hoofbeats approaching, the house was transformed. Cole came through the door and stopped short, looking around in surprise. "Did you do all this?" "I hope you don't mind," Abigail said, suddenly uncertain. "I just thought, mind? This place hasn't looked this good since my mother was alive." He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "Thank you. You didn't have to go to all this trouble. I wanted to earn my keep." Something shifted in his expression. "You don't have to earn anything, Abigail. You being here isn't conditional on how much work you do." "But I can't just take from you without giving something back," she protested. "That's not right." Cole crossed to the window, looking out at his land. "When my father died, I was barely holding on. The grief was eating me alive, and the ranch was falling apart because I couldn't find the will to care. A neighbor, old Tom Harris, he showed up one day with his sons. They spent a week helping me get things in order. Mended fences, rounded up strays, fixed the barn roof. When I tried to pay them, Tom refused, said that's what neighbors do. Said someday I'd have a chance to help someone else, and that would be payment enough." He turned back to her. "This is that chance, I figure. You helping around here, that's appreciated. But it's not required. You understand?" Abigail nodded, not trusting her voice. She'd never met anyone like Cole Turner, someone who gave without expectation, who helped without keeping score. It was foreign and unsettling and unexpectedly moving. "Now," Cole said, moving toward the kitchen, "how about I make us some lunch, and then you can tell me what you think you might want to do. Not right now," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "But eventually, what kind of life you're hoping to build." Over simple sandwiches and coffee, Abigail found herself talking more than she had in years. She told him about Boston, about the orphanage where kindness was rare and punishment common. She told him about going into service at 14, about Mrs. Aldridge's dress shop, where she'd spent 10 years creating beautiful things for women whose lives seemed like fairy tales compared to hers. "I was good at it," she said, surprised by the pride in her own voice. "The sewing, the designing. Mrs. Aldridge said I had an eye for it, but there was no future there, not really. I'd have worked until I was too old or too sick, and then," she shrugged, "the poorhouse, probably. Or worse." "So you answered the advertisement?" Cole said, understanding in his voice. "I thought it was a chance at something more. A home, a partner, maybe even children someday. Stupid, I know." "Not stupid," Cole said firmly. "Hopeful. There's a difference." "Hope doesn't pay well," Abigail said bitterly. "No," Cole agreed, "but neither does giving up." She looked at him, this man who'd taken her in without question, who spoke to her like she mattered, like her thoughts and feelings were worth hearing. "How are you not married?" she asked suddenly, then blushed. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." Cole laughed, a genuine sound that made his whole face brighten. "It's a fair question. Truth is, I came close once. Girl named Sarah Cunningham. We courted for about a year, talked about marriage. Then she met a banker from Tulsa, man with a big house, fancy clothes, prospects. Can't say I blamed her for choosing him. I'm a rancher with a small spread and rough hands, not much to offer a woman." "You offered me shelter when I had none," Abigail said quietly. "You offered kindness when I needed it most. That seems like quite a lot to offer." Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them. Understanding, connection, the first fragile thread of something neither was ready to name. The sound of approaching riders shattered the moment. Cole's expression shifted immediately, becoming alert, cautious. He stood, moving toward the window. "Stay here," he said quietly. But Abigail followed him, looking out to see 3 men on horseback approaching the house. They were rough-looking, the kind of men she'd learned to avoid in Boston. Hard eyes, harder faces, guns at their hips worn with the ease of frequent use. "You know them?" she asked. Unfortunately, Cole's jaw was tight. "The one in front is Jack Reeves. Works for some big cattlemen up north, but mostly he's muscle for hire. The other two are his cousins. They're trouble." The men dismounted and Cole stepped out onto the porch. Abigail stayed in the doorway, every instinct screaming danger. "Turner," the lead man said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Heard you got yourself a visitor. Pretty little thing from back east." "My guests are my business, Reeves," Cole said evenly. "That's so." Reeves grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "See? We heard different. Heard she came here looking for Mason Blake. Heard Blake owes some people money. People who don't like being cheated." Abigail's blood went cold. Cole had said Mason was in debt, but she hadn't considered that those debts might follow her here. "Miss Monroe has nothing to do with Blake's debts," Cole said, his voice hard as iron. "She came here on false pretenses. Blake's gone, and whatever he owes, she doesn't." "Maybe so," Reeves said, dismounting slowly. "But the men he owes, they might see it different, might figure she's worth something. Pretty woman like that. Could work off Blake's debt in Tulsa, if you know what I mean." The implication was clear and sickening. Abigail felt Cole tense beside her, felt the rage rolling off him in waves. "You need to leave," Cole said, and his voice was quiet now, dangerously quiet. "Now." "Or what?" Reeves laughed. "You gonna stop all three of us, Turner? You might be fast, but you ain't that fast." "Try me and find out." The air seemed to crackle with tension. Reeves's cousins had their hands near their guns, watching Cole with predatory interest. This was going to turn violent. Abigail could feel it building like a thunderstorm. "Wait," she said, stepping forward before she could think better of it. "Please, just wait." "Abigail, get back inside," Cole said, not taking his eyes off Reeves. "No." She moved to stand beside him, her heart hammering but her voice steady. "I'll go with them. If it means you don't get hurt, I'll—" "The hell you will," Cole said, and now he did look at her, his eyes blazing. "Get inside, now." "Listen to the man, sweetheart," Reeves said, grinning wider. "He's trying to save your virtue, though from what I hear, you were willing to marry a stranger for a roof over your head. How's this any different?" Cole moved so fast, Abigail almost missed it. One moment he was beside her, the next he was down the porch steps with his hand gripping Reeves' shirt front, his other hand pulled back in a fist. "You apologize to the lady," Cole growled. "Right now." Reeves's cousins drew their guns, pointing them at Cole's back. Abigail screamed, but Cole didn't flinch, didn't even look at them. "Apologize," he repeated. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Reeves, perhaps seeing something in Cole's eyes that suggested he'd happily take a bullet if it meant landing that punch, raised a hand to his cousins. "Easy, boys." He looked at Cole with new assessment. "My apologies, ma'am. That was uncalled for." Cole released him slowly, stepping back but keeping himself between Abigail and the three men. "Now get off my property, and tell whoever sent you that Abigail Monroe owes nothing to anyone. She's under my protection now. Anyone who comes for her comes through me. You make sure they understand that." Reeves straightened his shirt, anger and something like grudging respect warring on his face. "You're making a mistake, Turner. These men don't take no for an answer." "Then they can come tell me themselves. But they better come ready, because I won't ask twice before I start shooting." After a long moment, Reeves nodded. "Fair enough?" "You've been warned." He mounted his horse, his cousins following suit. "Hope she's worth it, Turner. Lot of trouble for a woman you just met." They rode off, dust rising in their wake. Cole stood motionless until they were out of sight. Then his shoulders sagged slightly. He turned to Abigail, and she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "You can't do that again," he said, his voice rough. "You can't offer to sacrifice yourself like that." "They were going to hurt you," she said, trembling now that the danger had passed. "Maybe kill you. I couldn't just stand there and—" "Yes, you could. You will." He gripped her shoulders gently. "Abigail, I meant what I said. You're under my protection now. That means I face the danger, not you. Understand?" "But why?" The question burst out of her. Why would you risk your life for me? You don't even know me. Cole's hands dropped from her shoulders. He looked away, across the prairie, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet. My mother, before she died, she made me promise something. She said, Ike, Cole, there's going to come a time when you have a choice to do the easy thing or the right thing. And the right thing is going to cost you, maybe a lot. But that's when it matters most, when it costs you something. She made me swear I'd always choose the right thing, no matter the price. He looked back at her. Protecting you, standing between you and men like that, it's the right thing. And I don't break promises to my mother. Abigail felt tears prick her eyes. Your mother raised a good man. She tried. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Come on, let's get inside. I need to think about what comes next. Inside, Cole paced while Abigail sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. The confrontation had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. She'd thought Mason's betrayal was the end of her troubles, but it seemed his sins were reaching out to taint her too. I'm going to town tomorrow, Cole said finally. Talk to the sheriff. Let him know what's going on. Reeves and his cousins, they're known troublemakers, but they're usually just bark. Still, better to have the law aware. What if they come back? Abigail asked. Then they come back, and I deal with it. He sat down across from her. Abigail, I need you to be honest with me. Is there anywhere you can go? Anyone who would take you in? Because if there is, it might be safer for you to... No, she said simply. There's nowhere and no one. I told you that. Then you stay here. He said it with such finality that she didn't dare argue. We'll figure this out. Those men Blake owes money to, they're businessmen at heart. Once they realize you've got nothing to do with him, that there's no profit in bothering you, they'll move on. And if they don't, Cole's expression hardened, then they'll learn that some things aren't worth the cost. The rest of the day passed quietly, both of them shaken by the morning's events. Abigail tried to keep busy, but her mind kept returning to the look in Reeves's eyes, the casual cruelty in his suggestion of what could happen to her. Cole worked outside, but she noticed he stayed closer to the house than usual, his rifle always within reach. That evening, as they sat down to a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, Abigail made a decision. I want to learn to shoot, she said abruptly. Cole looked up in surprise. What? A gun. I want to learn how to use one. If there's going to be trouble, I need to be able to protect myself, to help, if it comes to that. Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. It's not a bad idea, he said finally. But understand, carrying a gun means being willing to use it, to hurt someone, maybe kill them. That's not a light thing. I understand. And she did. The world had shown her its teeth today. She needed to grow some of her own. All right, Cole said. Tomorrow, after I get back from town, I'll teach you. They finished dinner in silence, but it was different from the comfortable quiet of before. There was tension now, awareness of the danger circling them, the reality that this fragile peace could shatter at any moment. As Abigail prepared for bed, she found herself pausing at the window, looking out at the barn where Cole slept. A lamp burned there, throwing his shadow against the wall. He was probably cleaning his guns, preparing for whatever came next. This man who owed her nothing had put himself between her and harm without hesitation. She'd spent her whole life learning to expect nothing from people, to rely only on herself, to understand that kindness always came with strings attached. But Cole Turner was rewriting those rules, showing her a different way of being in the world. It terrified her, because the more she saw of his goodness, his strength, his quiet integrity, the more she realized she was starting to care about him. And caring meant vulnerability. It meant the possibility of loss. She climbed into bed, pulling the handmade quilt up to her chin. Tomorrow, Cole would go to town, and she'd be alone here with nothing but her thoughts and her fears. Tomorrow they'd start preparing for whatever came next, learning to shoot, learning to defend this small patch of land and the life they were building on it. Building. The word caught in her mind. Were they building something? Or was she just a temporary guest in his life, someone to be helped and then sent on her way when the danger passed? She didn't know, but lying there in the darkness, listening to the prairie wind and the distant call of night birds, she found herself hoping, dangerous, foolish, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she'd found more than shelter here. Maybe she'd found home. In the barn, Cole sat on his cot, his rifle across his knees, his mind racing. He'd meant every word he'd said to Reeves. Abigail was under his protection now, and he'd face down hell itself before he let anyone harm her. But that protection came with complications he hadn't anticipated. The way she'd stepped forward today, offering to sacrifice herself to keep him safe, it had done something to him, cracked open something in his chest he'd kept locked tight for years. He couldn't care about her. That wasn't the deal. He was helping her because it was right, because his mother had raised him to be better than the kind of man who abandoned people in need. That was all. But the way she looked at him, with those eyes that held too much pain and too much strength all at once, the way she'd stood beside him on that porch, terrified but defiant, the way she'd made his house feel like a home again just by being in it. He was in trouble. The kind of trouble that had nothing to do with Reeves or debt collectors or any external threat. The kind that came from inside, from feeling things he had no right to feel for a woman who'd stay only until she could leave. He lay back on the cot, staring up at the barn rafters. Tomorrow he'd go to town, talk to the sheriff, maybe get some answers about who Blake owed and how serious the threat really was. He'd come back, teach Abigail to shoot, and continue this strange dance of domesticity and danger they'd found themselves in. And he'd keep his distance. He'd be kind, be helpful, be protective. But he wouldn't let himself hope for more, because hoping was how you got your heart broken. And he'd learned that lesson well enough with Sarah. Abigail would leave eventually, they always did. And when she did, he'd have his ranch and his solitude and the satisfaction of knowing he'd done the right thing. It would be enough. It had to be enough. But even as he thought it, he knew he was lying to himself. Because the truth was, he was already hoping. Already imagining what it would be like if she stayed, if that guest bedroom became truly hers, if her laughter filled his house and her presence filled the hollow spaces in his life. Already falling, and too proud or too scared to admit it. The night deepened around them, stars wheeling overhead in their ancient dance, the prairie holding its breath as if waiting to see what morning would bring. And in the house and the barn, two souls lay awake, both wondering the same thing. What happened when temporary started to feel permanent? When protection started to feel like something more? When shelter became home, and strangers became something neither was quite ready to name? Morning came too soon, painting the sky in streaks of rose and amber. Abigail woke to the sound of Cole moving around outside, the creak of the barn door, the low murmur of his voice talking to the horses. She dressed quickly, braided her hair with fingers that still trembled slightly when she thought about yesterday's confrontation, and emerged to find coffee already brewing on the stove. Cole came in a few minutes later, hat in hand, his face serious. "I'll be back by early afternoon," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Keep the door locked while I'm gone. Don't answer it for anyone you don't know, and even then, be careful. My rifle's there by the door, loaded. You remember what I showed you last night about the safety?" She nodded, though the thought of actually using the weapon made her stomach turn. "I remember." He studied her face, and she saw worry etched in the lines around his eyes. "I don't like leaving you here alone." "I'll be fine," she said, with more confidence than she felt. "It's broad daylight, and you said those men were mostly bark." "Mostly isn't the same as completely." He drained his coffee, set the cup down with a decisive clink. "If anything happens, anything at all, you fire that rifle straight up in the air. Tom Harris's spread is about 2 miles east. He'll hear it and come running." "Cole." She touched his arm without thinking, felt the tension coiled in his muscles. "Go. Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you get back." Something flickered in his eyes at her touch, at her words. For a moment she thought he might say something, but instead he just nodded, settled his hat on his head, and headed for the door. He paused there, hand on the frame, looking back at her. "Lock this behind me," he said quietly. "And Abigail? Thank you." "For what?" "For being here when I get back." Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the kitchen with those words echoing in her mind. She locked the door as instructed, then moved to the window to watch him ride away, his figure growing smaller against the vast prairie until he disappeared over a rise. The house felt different without him in it. Quieter, yes, but also less solid somehow, as if his presence had been part of the foundation and now she could feel how fragile everything really was. She poured herself coffee and sat at the table, trying to make a plan for the day. More mending, perhaps. The garden probably needed weeding. Simple, normal tasks to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling into fear. But first she found herself drawn back to the bedroom, to her suitcase still sitting largely unpacked in the corner. She'd been living out of it for 3 days now, too uncertain about her place here to fully settle in. But Cole's words this morning, the way he'd said, "when I get back," as if her presence was already assumed, already counted on, made her think maybe it was time to stop living like she had one foot out the door. She unpacked slowly, carefully, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the small wardrobe, arranging her few personal items on the dresser. A brush her mother had given her, or so she'd been told. She had no memory of the woman herself. A small Bible from the orphanage, inscribed with her name in a stranger's handwriting. A daguerreotype of Mrs. Aldridge's family, given to her as a Christmas gift 3 years ago. The closest thing she had to a photograph of people who'd cared about her. Such a small collection of belongings to represent 24 years of life. It should have made her sad, but instead she felt a strange sense of lightness. Nothing to weigh her down, nothing to tie her to a past that had never truly been hers. Maybe that was freedom of a sort. She was arranging this last of her things when she heard it. The distant sound of hoofbeats, coming fast. Her heart seized. Cole wouldn't be back this soon, and he wouldn't ride that hard unless something was wrong. She hurried to the window, peering out carefully from behind the curtain. 2 riders pushing their horses at a gallop. As they came closer, she recognized one of them. One of Reeves's cousins from yesterday. The other was a stranger, older, better dressed, with the look of someone used to giving orders and having them obeyed. They reined up in the yard, and the well-dressed man dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd spent his life on horseback. He said something to Reeves's cousin, who pointed toward the house, and Abigail's blood ran cold. She backed away from the window, her mind racing. The rifle was by the door where Cole had left it. She could fire a warning shot like he'd told her, bring Tom Harris running. But what if these men weren't deterred by an old rancher? What if they broke in before help could arrive? A sharp knock rattled the door. "Mrs. Blake? I know you're in there. I just want to talk." Mrs. Blake. They thought she was married to Mason. The assumption would have been laughable if it wasn't so terrifying. "You've got the wrong person," she called out, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I'm not Mrs. Blake. I've never even met Mason Blake." A pause. Then the man's voice again, smoother now, almost reasonable. "Then you won't mind opening the door so we can clear up this misunderstanding, will you, miss?" Every instinct screamed at her not to open that door. "Mr. Turner will be back soon," she said instead. "You can discuss this with him?" She heard low conversation outside, couldn't make out the words. Then Reeves's cousin spoke up, louder. "Turner's in town, lady. We made sure of it. Won't be back for hours." Her stomach dropped. They'd planned this. Waited until Cole left her alone. She moved quietly toward the rifle, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Listen," the well-dressed man said, and his tone had shifted, become harder. "Mason Blake stole from me. $5,000 he took, and I mean to have it back. Now you say you're not his wife, fine. Maybe that's true. But you came here looking for him, which means you know something. And I'm a patient man, but my patience has limits." $5,000. The amount staggered her. What kind of scheme had Mason been running? "I told you. I don't know anything," she called back. "He placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride. I answered it. I came here and he was gone. That's all I know." Another pause. Then she heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "Last chance, miss. Open this door or we open it for you." Abigail grabbed the rifle, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She'd never fired a gun in her life. Cole had shown her the basics last night. How to hold it, how to aim, how the safety worked. But knowing and doing were vastly different things. The door shuddered under a heavy impact. They were breaking in. She raised the rifle, pointed it at the door, and prayed. The wood splintered with the second impact, the lock giving way. The door crashed open, and the well-dressed man stood there, his own gun drawn, his eyes hard as flint. Then he saw the rifle pointed at him and stopped. "Well now," he said slowly, "that's quite a welcome. Get out." Her voice was steadier than she felt. Get out or I'll shoot. You ever fired that thing, sweetheart? He took a step forward. Because I have. Many times. And I can tell from the way you're holding it that you haven't. He was right. She could feel it in the awkward weight of the weapon, the uncertainty of her grip. But she kept it raised, kept her finger near the trigger the way Cole had shown her. Maybe I haven't, she said. But at this range, does it really matter? Even if I miss your heart, I'll hit something. Respect flickered across his features. Fair point. He didn't lower his gun, but he didn't advance either. My name's Garrett Sutton. Blake worked for me, helped arrange some cattle deals. Only the cattle were stolen, and the money he collected from the buyers went into his pocket instead of mine. $5,000 worth of my money. I don't have your money, Abigail said. I don't have any money. If I did, I wouldn't have been desperate enough to answer an advertisement from a stranger. Sutton studied her, his eyes calculating. You really don't know where he is, do you? No, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell him the time of day after what he did to me. A bitter laugh escaped Sutton's throat. He played you too then, should have known. Blake never could run a straight con, always had to complicate things. He finally lowered his gun, and Abigail felt some of the tension leak from her shoulders, though she kept the rifle raised. Look, Sutton said, I believe you. You're just another one of Blake's victims, but that doesn't solve my problem. He's got my money, and I want it back. Then find him and take it, Abigail said. I can't help you. Can't you? Sutton's eyes narrowed. See, here's my thinking. Blake ran because he knew I'd come for him. But he placed that advertisement for a bride, which means he was planning something. Maybe he thought a wife would make him look more legitimate. Maybe he was planning to use you as cover for whatever scheme came next. Point is, he wanted you for a reason. The reason was money, Abigail said bitterly. He thought I'd have a dowry. When he found out I didn't, he told me not to come. But you came anyway. Sutton took another step forward, and this time Abigail's finger tightened on the trigger. He stopped, which means Blake might not know you're here. And if he doesn't know, then maybe we can use that. Use it how? Simple. We let word slip that his bride showed up after all, that she's here, waiting for him. If he thinks there's still an angle to work, still something to gain, he might come back. And when he does, you'll be waiting, Abigail finished. Her arms were aching from holding the rifle, but she didn't dare lower it. And what happens to me in all this? You play the part of the faithful bride waiting for her man. We keep watch. When Blake shows up, we take him, get my money back, and you're free to go on with your life. And if he doesn't show up? Sutton shrugged. Then you're no worse off than you are now. Except you'll have done me a favor, and I'm a man who rewards favors. It was a trap, Abigail knew. Maybe not for her specifically, but a trap nonetheless. And she wanted no part of it. No, she said. I won't help you. Something dangerous flashed in Sutton's eyes. That wasn't a request, sweetheart. The rifle felt impossibly heavy in her arms. She knew she was outmatched, knew that Sutton could probably take the weapon from her before she could fire, knew that Reeves's cousin was still outside, another gun at the ready. But she also knew that the moment she lowered this rifle, she lost what little power she had. Mr. Sutton, she said, keeping her voice level, I've had a very difficult few days. I was abandoned by a man I'd never met, taken in by a stranger out of kindness, and threatened in my own home. I'm tired, I'm scared, and I'm holding a loaded rifle that I barely know how to use, which makes me dangerous in ways I suspect you can appreciate. So I'm going to ask you one more time to leave, and if you don't, I'm going to pull this trigger and pray to God I hit something important. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Sutton laughed, genuine amusement lighting his face. You've got spine, I'll give you that. Blake was a fool to pass you up. He holstered his gun slowly, deliberately. All right, I'll go, but this isn't over, miss. One way or another, I'm getting my money back. And if that means keeping an eye on you until Blake shows himself, that's what I'll do. Cole won't allow that. Cole Turner? Sutton's smile was sharp. Turner's a good man, from what I hear. Honest. But honest men don't fare well against men like me. He'll do what he thinks is right, and he'll probably get himself killed for the trouble. That what you want? The question hit her like a physical blow. The image of Cole lying dead in the yard, killed because he'd tried to protect her, made her stomach turn. You'd kill him? I'd rather not. Like I said, I hear he's a good man. But if he gets between me and my money... Sutton let the sentence hang. Think about my offer. Help me catch Blake, and everyone gets what they want. Refuse, and things get messy for everyone involved. He tipped his hat to her, a mockery of courtesy, and walked out. She heard him mount his horse, heard the two men ride away. Only then did she lower the rifle, her arms screaming in relief. She stood there shaking, the enormity of what had just happened washing over her. They knew about Cole now, knew he was protecting her, and Sutton had made it clear he'd go through Cole to get what he wanted. She sank into a chair, the rifle across her lap, and tried to think. She could leave. Pack her things and disappear before Cole got back, take herself out of his life and the danger with her. It would be the noble thing to do, the selfless thing. Cole would be safe, and she'd be... what? Alone again, running again, back to having nothing and no one. But at least he'd be alive. The thought of leaving, of walking away from the only person who'd shown her real kindness in years, made her chest ache. But the thought of Cole dead because of her made her want to scream. She was still sitting there, frozen with indecision, when she heard another horse approaching. This time, she recognized the rider immediately. Cole, coming fast, his face dark with fury. He was off his horse before it had fully stopped, striding toward the house with purpose. He saw the broken door and his expression shifted from anger to fear. "Abigail!" "I'm here," she called, meeting him at the doorway. "I'm all right." He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes searching her face for injury. "What happened? Who did this?" "A man named Garrett Sutton. He came with one of Reeves's cousins. He's the one Blake stole from." The words tumbled out. $5,000, Cole. Mason stole $5,000 from him. Cole's jaw worked, tension radiating from him in waves. "Did they hurt you?" "No, I had the rifle. I pointed it at him and he left." "You pointed..." Cole pulled her into his arms suddenly, fiercely. "God, Abigail, you could have been killed." She stood rigid for a moment, shocked by the embrace, then slowly relaxed into it. His chest was solid against her cheek, his heart hammering almost as hard as hers. She could feel the fear in him, the barely controlled rage, and underneath it something else, something that made her own pulse quicken. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I brought this to your door." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands still on her shoulders. "This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." His eyes were intense, blazing with emotion. "I went to town, talked to the sheriff, found out about Sutton, about the money. Sheriff said Sutton's been looking for Blake for weeks, getting more desperate. I came back as fast as I could. He wants me to help him catch Mason," Abigail said. "He thinks if word gets out that I'm here, Mason might come back. And when he does, Sutton will be waiting." "Over my dead body." "That's what I'm afraid of." She gripped his shirt, bunching the fabric in her fists. "Cole, he said if you get in his way, he'll kill you. He said honest men don't fare well against men like him." "He's probably right about that." Cole's smile was grim. "But I'm not planning to be honest about how I deal with him. This isn't a joke." "I'm not joking." He took her hands in his calloused thumbs rubbing gentle circles on her knuckles. "Abigail, I told you before, you're under my protection. That means something to me. It means everything to me. I'm not letting Sutton or anyone else use you as bait. Then what do we do?" Cole was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We find Blake ourselves. Get to him before Sutton does, convince him to return the money. It's the only way to end this cleanly. How do we even begin to look for him? He could be anywhere." "Not anywhere." Cole released her hands and moved to look out the broken doorway. "Sheriff said Blake's got a sister in Guthrie. If he's running scared, that's where he'd go. Family's all a man's got when the world turns against him." "Guthrie's 2 days' ride from here," Abigail said. She'd studied the maps before coming west, memorizing towns and distances with the desperate hope of someone trying to visualize a future. 3 days probably if we're careful." He turned back to her. "And that's another thing. I'm not leaving you here alone again. Not with Sutton circling. You're coming with me. I can't ask you to..." "You're not asking. I'm telling." His voice softened. Besides, if we're going to convince Blake to do the right thing, having you there might help. You're the injured party in all this. Maybe seeing what his con cost a real person will prick whatever conscience he's got left. It was a long shot, and they both knew it. But it was better than sitting here waiting for Sutton to make his next move, better than living in fear every time Cole had to leave the ranch. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow at first light. I'll need to make arrangements for the livestock. Ask Tom Harris to keep an eye on the place. You should pack light, just what you absolutely need. We'll be traveling rough, sleeping under stars most likely." The thought should have terrified her. A few days ago, she'd been living in a boarding house in Boston, sleeping in a proper bed with a roof over her head. Now she was planning to ride across the territory with a man she'd known less than a week, chasing a criminal who'd already proven he had no scruples. But instead of fear, what she felt was something closer to excitement, a sense of taking action, of fighting back instead of simply enduring. "I'll be ready," she said. Cole studied her face, and she saw approval there, and something warmer that made her breath catch. "I believe you will." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I need to fix this door before nightfall. And Abigail? What you did today, standing up to Sutton with that rifle, that took real courage. You may have come out here thinking you needed someone to take care of you, but the truth is, you're stronger than you know." After he left to get his tools, Abigail stood in the kitchen, his words echoing in her mind. Stronger than you know. Maybe he was right. Maybe she'd been so busy surviving that she hadn't noticed she was also becoming someone new. Someone who could point a rifle at a dangerous man. Someone who could choose action over cowering. Someone who could belong in this wild, hard, beautiful land. She spent the afternoon preparing for the journey, choosing what few items she'd need. Mending a tear in her riding skirt that she hadn't worn since leaving Boston. Cole worked on the door, his movements efficient and sure, occasionally glancing her way with an expression she couldn't quite read. As evening fell, he made them dinner, stew from yesterday's leftovers, thickened with flour and seasoned with herbs from the garden. They ate quietly, the weight of tomorrow's journey hanging between them. "Cole," she said finally, setting down her spoon, "what if we find him and he won't help? What if he refuses to return the money?" "Then we convince him it's in his best interest." Cole's voice was hard. "One way or another, this ends in Guthrie. Either Blake does the right thing, or we drag him back to face Sutton ourselves. And if Sutton won't accept the money, if he wants blood instead, then I'll give him mine before I let him touch you or Blake." He met her eyes across the table. "I know you probably think that's foolish, that it's not worth dying for someone else's mistakes. But I made you a promise when I brought you here, that you'd be safe, and I keep my promises." Abigail felt tears sting her eyes. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His voice was gentle now. "I know you're brave and kind. I know you mend my shirts without being asked and bring wildflowers inside to brighten the table. I know you stood up to armed men to protect yourself. I know that in just a few days, you've made this house feel like a home again." He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "And I know that the thought of anything happening to you makes me feel things I haven't felt in a very long time." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken meaning. Abigail's heart was racing, her mind trying to process what he was saying, what he might mean. "Cole, don't." He held up a hand. "Don't say anything yet. Not until this is over. Not until you're safe and have real choices about your future. But I needed you to know, before we ride out tomorrow into God knows what, that you matter to me. More than you probably should, given how little time we've known each other. But you do." She wanted to tell him that he mattered to her too, that these few days had shown her what it meant to be cared for, protected, valued as a person rather than a pair of hands to do work. She wanted to tell him that the thought of leaving, when this was over, when she was safe, felt like tearing out a piece of her soul. But he was right. Now wasn't the time. Not with danger circling, not with so much uncertainty ahead. "Thank you," she said instead, "for everything. For being the kind of man who keeps his promises." Something passed between them then, an understanding that went beyond words. Whatever happened in Guthrie, whatever the future held, they were in this together now, partners in more than just survival. That night, Abigail lay in bed listening to the sounds of Cole moving around outside, checking the horses, loading supplies for tomorrow's journey. The broken door was mended, but she could still feel the violation of Sutton's intrusion, the reminder that safety was an illusion that could shatter with a kick. But she also felt something else, a strange sense of rightness about what they were about to do. For once in her life, she wasn't running away from something. She was running toward it, toward answers and resolution, toward taking control of a situation that had controlled her for too long. And she wasn't alone. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever dangers waited on the road to Guthrie, she'd face them with Cole beside her. A man who'd taken her in when she had nothing, who'd defended her without question, who'd shown her that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be protected and cared for. As sleep finally claimed her, her last thought was of his words. You matter to me. In the barn, Cole checked his guns one more time, making sure everything was in order for tomorrow. He knew the road to Guthrie, knew the dangers it held, not just from the land itself, but from men who might be watching, waiting. Sutton wouldn't let this go easily. He'd have men keeping an eye on the ranch, would know the moment they left. They'd likely be followed, possibly intercepted. Cole needed to be ready for anything, but it wasn't the danger that kept him awake. It was the memory of Abigail in his arms this afternoon, the feel of her trembling against him, the fierce protectiveness that had surged through him when he'd seen that broken door. He'd meant what he said at dinner. She mattered to him in ways that defied logic and good sense. He'd known her less than a week. He'd taken her in out of duty, out of the lessons his mother had taught him about helping those in need. But somewhere along the way, duty had transformed into something else, something that made him want to tear apart anyone who threatened her, something that made the thought of her leaving, even to safety somewhere else, feel unbearable. He was falling in love with her, maybe already had fallen, and that complicated everything. Because when this was over, when Blake had returned the money and Sutton had no reason to threaten her anymore, she'd have choices. She could go back east, return to the civilization and refinement she'd known. She could find a proper husband, a man with prospects and polish, not a rough rancher with calloused hands and a modest spread. She deserved those choices, deserved a chance to build the life she wanted, free from desperation and fear. Even if that life didn't include him. He lay back on his cot, resigned to another sleepless night. Tomorrow they'd ride out, and whatever came after, danger, resolution, heartbreak, he'd face it knowing he'd done everything he could to give her a chance at the future she deserved. Even if that future tore him apart, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human drama and desperate hearts. And in the house and the barn, two people lay awake, both wrestling with the same terrifying truth. That sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't the men with guns or the criminals seeking revenge, but the quiet, relentless way two hearts could find each other in the midst of chaos and decide, against all reason and sense, that they belonged together. Dawn broke cold and clear, the kind of morning that promised heat later but started with a chill that seeped into the bones. Abigail was already dressed when she heard Cole's knock, her small traveling bag packed with only essentials. A change of clothes, her brush, the daguerreotype that represented her only connection to anything resembling family. "Ready?" Cole asked when she opened the door. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd slept as poorly as she had. "As I'll ever be." They ate a quick breakfast of cold biscuits and coffee, neither saying much. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the air. Cole had already loaded the horses, already said his goodbyes to Tom Harris, who'd arrived at first light to watch over the ranch. The old man had looked at them both with knowing eyes, asked no questions, just promised to keep things running and keep watch for trouble. The sun was barely above the horizon when they rode out, Cole on his steady gelding and Abigail on a gentle mare he'd saddled for her. She wasn't an experienced rider. Her few lessons had been years ago, brief and practical, but the mare seemed to understand, moving with careful patience as they headed northeast toward Guthrie. They'd been riding for perhaps an hour, the ranch long out of sight behind them, when Cole spoke. "We're being followed." Abigail's heart jumped. "Are you sure?" "Two riders staying about a mile back. Been there since we left." His voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Sutton's men, most likely. He wants to see where we're going." "What do we do?" "Nothing right now. They're keeping their distance, which means they're watching, not attacking. Let them watch." He glanced at her. "You holding up all right? We can rest if you need to." "I'm fine." And surprisingly, she was. The initial stiffness in her legs was easing, her body remembering the rhythm of riding. He glanced at her. "You holding up all right? We can rest if you need to." "I'm fine." And surprisingly, she was. The initial stiffness in her legs was easing, her body remembering the rhythm of riding. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, golden grass rippling in the breeze like waves on an ocean. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way that matched her mood perfectly. They rode through the morning, stopping once to water the horses at a small creek. Cole helped her down, his hand steady on her waist, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met and held, and Abigail felt that same electric current from last night that pulled towards something neither of them was quite ready to name. "Cole," she started, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know." His voice was rough. "But not yet. Not until you're safe." They remounted and continued, the sun climbing higher, the air growing thick with heat. The two riders behind them maintained their distance, patient as buzzards waiting for something to die. It set Abigail's nerves on edge, knowing they were being watched, knowing that at any moment those men could decide to close the distance and force a confrontation. Around midday, they crested a rise and Cole pulled up short. In the valley below, a small wagon train had stopped. 3 wagons, maybe a dozen people, with what looked like a broken wheel being the cause of their halt. "We could go around," Cole said, watching them. "But if we're going to be followed anyway, might be safer to travel with others for a while. Sutton's men won't try anything with witnesses." They rode down to the wagon train and were met by a weathered man who introduced himself as Jacob Brennan, leading his family and 2 others to claim land near Guthrie. His eyes took in Cole's guns, Abigail's Eastern dress, and drew his own conclusions. "Heading to Guthrie ourselves," Cole said easily. "Happy to help with that wheel if you need an extra pair of hands." Brennan's relief was visible. "Would appreciate it. Been struggling with the damn thing for an hour." He looked at Abigail. "Begging your pardon, ma'am." While Cole worked with Brennan and another man on the wheel, Abigail found herself surrounded by the women. Brennan's wife Sarah, her sister Emma, and Emma's daughter, a girl of about 16 named Lucy. They were curious but kind, offering her water and shade under one of the wagon canopies. "You 2 married?" Sarah asked, her eyes sharp despite her friendly tone. "No," Abigail said. "We're traveling together." The women exchanged glances that suggested they had opinions about that, but Sarah's next words surprised her. "None of my business either way. Out here, the old rules don't always apply. Sometimes you gotta make your own way. Propriety be damned." She handed Abigail a cup of water. "He seems like a good man, though. The way he looks at you, like you're something precious he's afraid of breaking." Abigail felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He's been very kind." "Kind," Emma laughed. "Honey, that man isn't being kind. He's being protective. There's a difference." Lucy, who'd been quiet until now, suddenly pointed behind them. "Ma, there's riders coming." Everyone turned. The 2 men who'd been following them were approaching, no longer bothering to keep their distance. Cole saw them too and straightened from his work, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. The riders came to a stop at the edge of the camp. One of them, Reeves's cousin, Abigail recognized, tipped his hat mockingly. "Afternoon, folks. Just passing through." "Then pass through," Cole said, his voice flat. "Now, that's not very neighborly." The second man, older with a scar running down his cheek, grinned. "We're just concerned citizens, making sure this young lady is traveling of her own free will. Wouldn't want anyone to think she was being forced into anything improper." Brennan stepped forward, reading the tension correctly. "The lady seems perfectly content to me, and we don't take kindly to strangers making insinuations about folks we're traveling with." Scarface's grin faded. "This doesn't concern you, old man." "It does now." Brennan's 2 oldest sons had materialized beside him, both holding rifles. "You boys can move along, or we can have ourselves a problem. Your choice." For a tense moment, nobody moved. Then Reeves' cousin laughed, a harsh sound. "No problem here, just making conversation." He looked at Cole. "But we'll be seeing you in Guthrie, Turner. Count on it." They rode off, but not far. Abigail could see them settling on a rise about a quarter-mile away, clearly planning to wait and continue following once the wagon train moved on. Friends of yours? Brennan asked Cole. Not hardly. Cole's jaw was tight. They work for a man who's got business with someone I'm tracking. They think following us will lead them to him. And will it? Maybe. That's what I'm hoping. Cole met Brennan's eyes. I don't want to bring trouble to you and yours. Soon as that wheel's fixed, we'll move on, draw them away. But Sarah shook her head. You'll do no such thing. We're all headed to Guthrie, and there's safety in numbers. You'll travel with us, and those vultures can watch all they want. They won't try anything with all of us together. It was decided, despite Cole's protests. They traveled together for the rest of the day, the wagon train moving slowly but steadily northeast. The two riders maintained their distance, dark shapes against the horizon that never quite disappeared. That evening, they made camp in a natural depression that offered some shelter from the wind. Brennan's group had done this before and moved with practiced efficiency. Wagons circled, fire built, watches assigned. Cole helped where he could, but Abigail noticed he kept himself positioned between her and the direction where Sutton's men had made their own camp, visible only by their distant fire. After dinner, a communal affair of beans and salt pork that somehow tasted better shared, Lucy approached Abigail where she sat near the fire. Miss Abigail, can I ask you something? Of course. The girl sat down, her young face serious in the firelight. Are you afraid? Of where you're going? Of what might happen? Abigail considered the question. Yes, she admitted. Very afraid. But you're going anyway. Yes. Why? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Because staying afraid in one place doesn't make you any safer than being afraid while moving forward. At least this way I'm doing something about it. Lucy nodded slowly, processing this. Pa says we're going to Guthrie to claim land, to build something that's ours. Ma's afraid, I can tell. But she goes anyway because the dream is worth the fear. She looked at Abigail. Is Mr. Turner your dream? The question, so direct and innocent, hit Abigail like a physical blow. I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe. Or maybe he's just a good man helping someone in trouble. He's more than that. Lucy's certainty was startling. I've seen how he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're the only real thing in the whole world. Before Abigail could respond, Cole appeared out of the darkness. Time for you to get some sleep, Lucy. Your pa's looking for you. Lucy stood, gave Abigail a knowing smile, and disappeared toward the wagons. Cole took her place by the fire, close enough that Abigail could feel the warmth of him despite the night's chill. You should rest too, he said quietly. We've got another hard day tomorrow. I don't think I can sleep, not with them out there watching. They won't come into camp. Too many witnesses, too many guns. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. But I'll keep watch anyway, just in case. Cole, you need to sleep too. I will. After you do. He looked at her then, his face half shadowed by firelight. Abigail, when we get to Guthrie, when we find Blake, things might get complicated, dangerous. If I tell you to run, to get away, I need to know you'll do it. I'm not leaving you to face danger alone. That's exactly what you'll do if it comes to that. His voice was firm. This isn't your fight. Blake wronged you, yes, but the debt, the violence, that's between him and Sutton. I won't have you caught in the crossfire. And I won't hide while you risk your life for me. She matched his intensity. You said we're partners in this. Partners don't abandon each other. Partners also don't let each other die for mistakes that aren't theirs. Then we'll both be careful. Both stay alive. She reached out, took his hand before she could think better of it. I've lost too much already, Cole. I won't lose you too. His fingers tightened around hers, rough and warm and solid. You won't lose me. I promise you that. He raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that sent heat rushing through her. Now please, try to rest. I need you sharp tomorrow. She did try, lying on a bedroll near the fire while Cole kept watch. But sleep was elusive, her mind spinning with worry and planning, and the memory of his lips on her skin. Around her the camp settled into quiet, soft snores, the occasional murmur of the watch changing, the crackling of the fire. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to Cole's hand on her shoulder, his voice urgent but quiet. Abigail, wake up. We need to move. Now. She sat up, instantly alert. What's wrong? Their fire went out an hour ago. I thought maybe they'd just gone to sleep, but I sent one of Brennan's boys to check. His face was grim. They're gone. Rode out quiet, heading northeast. Toward Guthrie. They're not following anymore. They're getting ahead of us. Cole was already moving, gathering their things. They know where we're headed now. They'll warn Sutton, maybe set up an ambush. We need to move fast, get there before they can prepare. Brennan appeared, his rifle in hand. Trouble? Those men who were following us took off. They'll beat us to Guthrie at the pace your wagons move. Cole looked at him. No offense meant, but we need to ride hard now. Can't wait for the train. Understood. Brennan gripped Cole's shoulder. You watch yourself, Turner, and you take care of that young lady. With my life. Within minutes, they were mounted and riding, pushing the horses harder than was wise in the dark, but having no choice. The moon was waning, providing just enough light to see the trail. Cole set a punishing pace, only slowing when the terrain became too treacherous. They rode through the remainder of the night and into the gray pre-dawn, stopping only twice to rest the horses. Abigail's legs ached, her back screamed in protest, but she didn't complain. Cole's face was set in determined lines, his focus absolute. As the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they crested a hill and saw it. Guthrie, sprawling across the prairie like a promise or a threat, depending on your perspective. It was bigger than Hollow Bend, more established, with actual streets and multiple buildings that suggested permanence. We made good time, Cole said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. But they're probably already here, already warned Sutton. So what do we do? We find Blake before they do. He looked at her. You remember what he looks like from his letters? Any description he gave? He said he was tall, dark-haired, that's all. It seemed impossibly inadequate now. His sister's name is Margaret Blake. That's what the sheriff told me. We find her. We find him. Cole urged his horse forward. Stay close to me. Don't talk to anyone we don't know. And if shooting starts, I run. I know. She didn't agree with it, but she wouldn't argue now. They entered Guthrie as the town was waking, shopkeepers opening doors, early risers heading to breakfast. Cole found a livery stable and arranged for the horses to be fed and watered. Then they set out on foot to find Margaret Blake. It didn't take long. The third person they asked, an older woman sweeping her porch, directed them to a modest house on the edge of town. Margaret Blake? Sure, I know her. Seamstress, works out of her home. That house there with the blue shutters. But I'd mind my business if I were you. She's got her brother staying with her, and he's trouble from what I hear. Cole thanked her, and they approached the house carefully. Before they could knock, the door opened and a woman stood there. Mid-30s, tired eyes, her hands stained with dye. Margaret Blake. It had to be. If you're here about debts, he's not here, she said immediately. We're not collectors, Abigail said quickly, but we do need to speak with your brother. It's urgent. Margaret's eyes narrowed, taking in Abigail's face, her traveling clothes. You're her, the bride. I was meant to be, yes. He said you didn't come, that he'd warned you away. Margaret's voice held accusation and weariness in equal measure. He did. I came anyway. And now there are men who want to hurt him, hurt anyone near him, including you. Cole spoke with quiet authority. Ma'am, your brother stole a lot of money from dangerous people. They're here in Guthrie, and they will find him. The only way to stop this cleanly is for him to return what he took. He doesn't have it. Gambled most of it away. Spent the rest. Margaret's shoulders sagged. I told him not to come here, told him I couldn't help him. But he's my brother. What was I supposed to do? Where is he? Abigail asked gently. Margaret hesitated, then stepped back. Come in, quickly, before anyone sees you. The house was small but neat, the front room clearly serving as Margaret's workspace with fabric and thread everywhere. She led them through to a back room where a man sat at a small table, his head in his hands. He looked up as they entered, and Abigail felt a jolt of recognition despite never having seen him before. This was the man who'd promised her a future, then snatched it away. Mason Blake was handsome in a dissolute way, his face showing signs of too much drink and too little sleep. When he saw Abigail, he went pale. You. Me. Her voice was steadier than she felt. The woman you abandoned on a train platform. The woman whose life you tried to ruin with your schemes. I didn't mean... He stood, swayed slightly. I sent the letter. I told you not to come. After I'd already left everything behind, anger surged through her, hot and righteous. After you'd taken what little I had for train fare. After you'd made me believe I had a future waiting. I thought you'd have money, Mason said, and had the grace to look ashamed. The advertisement was meant to find someone with a dowry, something to help me pay off my debts. When you wrote that you had nothing, you threw me away like garbage. Abigail stepped closer. Do you have any idea what you did? I had nowhere to go. No money, no job, no home to return to. I could have died on that platform. But you didn't. Mason's eyes shifted to Cole. You found yourself a protector. Cole moved fast, had Mason against the wall with his forearm across his throat before Abigail could blink. You don't talk about her. You don't even look at her. Understand? Cole, don't, Margaret said, fear in her voice. Please, he's not worth it. Cole released Mason but didn't step back. You stole $5,000 from Garrett Sutton. He's here in Guthrie, and he's coming for you. Your only chance is to return the money. I told you, I don't have it. Mason's voice rose toward panic. It's gone. Then you better find a way to get it, because Sutton doesn't seem like the forgiving type. Cole's voice was hard. And I'll be damned if I let you bring more trouble to people who don't deserve it. A crash from the front of the house made them all freeze. Margaret moved toward the sound, but Cole stopped her. Stay here. He drew his gun, moved to the doorway. Turner! Sutton's voice came from the front room. I know you're here. I know Blake's here. Come out peaceful, and maybe nobody has to die today. Cole looked back at Abigail, his eyes intense. Remember what I said. If it goes bad, you run. Cole, promise me. I promise. The lie tasted bitter, but she saw the relief in his face. He moved into the front room, Abigail following despite knowing she shouldn't. Sutton stood there with 4 men, all armed. He smiled when he saw Cole, but it was a predator's smile, all teeth and no warmth. There you are. And Miss Monroe. How delightful. Sutton's eyes found her, held her with disturbing intensity. I have to thank you, my dear. Leading us right to Blake saved us considerable effort. We didn't lead you anywhere, Cole said. You followed us. Details. Sutton waved a hand dismissively. Point is, we're all here now, so let's settle this like civilized people. Blake comes with me, he returns my money or works it off, and everyone else goes free. Simple. He doesn't have your money, Abigail said. He gambled it away. Sutton's smile faded. Then he'll work it off. $5,000 at, say, $10 a week? That's about 10 years of labor. I'm sure I can find use for him. That's slavery, Margaret said from the doorway. You can't... I can do whatever I want with a thief who stole from me. Sutton's voice went cold. Now, Blake, come out here, or I start shooting people until you do, starting with your sister. Mason emerged, his face ashen. Don't hurt her. This is between you and me. Finally, some sense. Sutton gestured to his men. Take him. No. Cole stepped between them, his gun raised. He stays. Sutton sighed. Turner, don't be stupid. You're outnumbered and outgunned. I don't want to kill you, but I will if you force me to. Then you'll have to, because I'm not moving. The room crackled with tension. Abigail could see Cole calculating odds, knew he was aware he couldn't win this fight. But he stood there anyway, immovable, a wall between Mason and Sutton's men. Why? Sutton asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Why die for a man who's not worth the powder to blow him to hell? A man who wronged this woman you're protecting? Because it's the right thing, Cole said simply. You want Blake? Fine. But you take him to a proper sheriff. Let the law handle it. That's civilization, Sutton. That's justice. What you're proposing is just revenge dressed up fancy. For a long moment, Sutton considered this. Then he laughed. You know what, Turner? I actually respect that. Stupid, but honorable. His hand moved toward his gun. Unfortunately, honor doesn't pay debts. Everything happened at once. Sutton drew, Cole fired, and Abigail screamed. But Cole's shot went wide. Intentionally, she realized. aimed to warn, not to kill. Sutton's men raised their weapons, and Cole dove to the side, pulling Abigail with him as bullets tore through the air where they'd been standing. Margaret screamed. Mason bolted for the back door. And Cole pushed Abigail toward the floor, his body covering hers as gunfire erupted around them. "Run," he said in her ear. "Now, Abigail, run!" But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only feel the weight of him protecting her, could only hear the deafening sound of guns and breaking glass and men shouting. This was how it ended, she thought, with strange clarity. Not on a platform in the sun, but here in a stranger's house, with the only good thing in her life about to be torn away by violence and greed. Then Cole was moving, returning fire, his shots precise and controlled. One of Sutton's men went down, clutching his shoulder. Another ducked behind furniture, and Sutton himself was advancing, his face twisted with rage. "Enough!" A new voice, loud and authoritative, cut through the chaos. "Drop your weapons, all of you!" The sheriff stood in the doorway, a shotgun raised, 3 deputies behind him. Everyone froze. "I said drop them!" The sheriff's voice brooked no argument. Slowly, reluctantly, guns lowered. Cole stood, helping Abigail to her feet, his eyes never leaving Sutton. The room was a disaster. Broken furniture, shattered glass, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on in my town?" The sheriff looked at each of them in turn. "Garrett Sutton," Cole said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. "He's here to collect a debt through force. Mason Blake stole from him, yes, but Sutton was planning to take him without legal process." "That true, Sutton?" The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "The man's a thief. I want what's mine." "Then you file a proper complaint, and we handle it legal-like." The sheriff gestured to his deputies. "Disarm these men. We're taking this to my office, sorting it out proper." He looked at Mason, who'd been dragged back inside by one of the deputies. "You too, Blake. You're under arrest for theft." As Sutton's men were being disarmed, Sutton himself looked at Cole with something like respect. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Turner." "Probably both," Cole admitted. "But she's safe. That's all that matters." Sutton's eyes shifted to Abigail, and she saw understanding dawn there. "Ah, so that's how it is." He smiled, but it was different now, less predatory, more knowing. "You know, Turner, if you'd just told me you were in love with her, I might have backed off sooner. A man protecting his woman, that I can respect." Cole didn't deny it, and Abigail's heart stuttered at the admission in his silence. They spent the next several hours at the sheriff's office, giving statements, explaining the whole complicated mess. The sheriff, a pragmatic man named Dawson, listened to everything and made his judgment. "Blake, you're looking at prison time for theft. Sutton, you're paying a fine for attempted vigilante justice and the property damage to the Blake residence. As for the money," he looked at Mason. "Where exactly did you spend it?" "Poker games. Saloons. Most of it went to a man named Curtis in Tulsa." Dawson nodded slowly. "Then Sutton's got a claim to pursue with Curtis, and Blake's got a debt to society to pay. But it'll be handled legal." He looked at Abigail and Cole. "You two are free to go. I'd suggest you get out of town before anyone decides to hold a grudge." Outside the sheriff's office, Abigail stood blinking in the afternoon sun, hardly able to believe it was over. Cole stood beside her, silent, his hand at the small of her back, a touch so natural it seemed he didn't even realize he was doing it. "It's done," she said, almost disbelieving. "It's actually done." "Yeah." Cole's voice was rough. "You're safe now. Sutton's got no reason to bother you anymore. Blake's going to prison. It's finished. Safe. Free." The word should have brought relief, joy even. Instead, Abigail felt a strange hollowness opening in her chest. Because Cole was right. It was finished, which meant she had to figure out what came next. Where she went, who she became, a life without Cole in it, most likely, because why would he want her to stay now? His obligation was fulfilled. He'd protected her, seen her through the danger, done everything his mother had taught him about helping those in need. "What will you do now?" Cole asked, and his voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "I don't know." She looked up at him. This man who'd become everything to her in such a short time. Go back east, maybe. Try to find work. Start over somewhere. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe, or disappointment, but he nodded. That makes sense. Boston's got more opportunities for a woman with your skills. Yes. The word felt like swallowing glass. What about you? Back to the ranch. Back to normal, I suppose. He looked away toward the horizon. It's been quiet there for years. I imagine it'll be quiet again. They stood there in awkward silence, both wanting to say something, neither knowing how. The unspoken words from the night before hung between them, those careful admissions of feeling that had been conditional on her safety. Well, she was safe now. So, where did that leave them? Cole. Abigail. They spoke at the same time, then stopped. Cole gestured for her to continue. I just wanted to say thank you, she said, the words utterly inadequate for everything she felt. For everything. For taking me in, protecting me, showing me what it means to have someone care. I'll never forget it. Never forget you. His jaw worked, emotions warring across his face. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. Because you changed my life. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. I came here broken, abandoned, believing I was worth nothing. And you showed me different. You showed me I deserved to be protected, to be valued, to matter to someone. That's a gift I can never repay. Abigail. Her name was a plea, rough and raw. Don't. Don't what? Don't say goodbye like this is easy for you, like you're not... He stopped, shook his head. Never mind. It's not fair of me. Not fair to what? To tell me how you feel? She stepped closer, desperate suddenly. Cole, please, I need to know. What you said before about me mattering to you, did you mean it? Of course I meant it. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw everything in his eyes, the longing, the love, the certainty that he was about to lose her. I meant every word. You matter to me more than anything, more than the ranch, more than my own safety, more than... His voice broke. More than I have any right to feel for someone I've known such a short time. Then why are we talking about me leaving? The tears came now, unstoppable. Why are we standing here saying goodbye when neither of us wants to? Because you deserve more than I can give you. The words burst out of him. You deserve a real life, Abigail. Not a hard-scrabble existence on a small ranch with a man who's got nothing but calloused hands and a modest spread. You deserve comfort and security, and I deserve to choose. She was crying openly now, not caring who saw. I deserve to decide what my life looks like, what I want, who I want it with. And I choose you, Cole Turner. I choose the ranch, and the hard work, and the man with calloused hands who treats me like I'm precious. I choose the life we could build together, if you'll have me. He stared at her, hope and disbelief warring on his face. You mean that? You'd stay? Give up the chance to go back east, to find something better? There is nothing better than you. She touched his face, felt the roughness of stubble, the warmth of his skin. Don't you understand? You're not the consolation prize, Cole. You're the dream I didn't know I was allowed to have. He pulled her into his arms then, held her so tight she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. She felt him trembling, felt the fierce emotion radiating from him. I love you, he said, the words muffled but clear. Bah. God help me. I've loved you since you stood on my porch with that rifle, scared but defiant. Since you mended my shirts without being asked. Since you made my house feel like a home again. I love you, and I don't want you to go. I want you to stay. He pulled back to look at her. I want to marry you, Abigail. Not because you need protection or because you have nowhere else to go, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. Joy burst through her chest, bright and overwhelming. Yes, she said through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. He kissed her then, right there on the street in broad daylight with half of Guthrie watching. Kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning, like she was light and he'd been lost in darkness. Kissed her with all the pent-up emotion of the past days, all the fear and relief and love and desperate hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I don't have much to offer you, he said quietly. The ranch is small, the work is hard, and there'll be struggles. But I promise you this. You'll never doubt that you're loved. You'll never doubt that you matter, and you'll never, ever be abandoned again. That's all I've ever wanted, she whispered. A place to belong. Someone to belong to. You gave me that the moment you said I was coming home with you. Home. The word resonated through her. Not a building, not a place on a map, but wherever Cole was, wherever they built their life together. That was home. They made their way to the telegraph office, Cole sending word to Tom Harris that they'd be back in a few days and to keep watching the ranch. Then they found a modest hotel, separate rooms, Cole insisted, even though they were engaged now, because propriety still mattered, and collapsed into much-needed rest. That evening, over dinner in the hotel's small restaurant, they talked about the future, about the ranch, about what Abigail could do with her sewing skills to bring in extra income, about the life they'd build together. I was thinking, Cole said, pushing food around his plate, maybe we should stop in Hollow Bend on the way back. Get married there, proper-like. Unless you want something bigger, more, no. Abigail reached across the table, took his hand. Hollow Bend is perfect, where it all started, where you found me, where he'd saved her, where she'd been given a second chance at life, at love, at everything she'd thought was lost forever. They were married 3 days later in Hollow Bend's small church, with Tom Harris and his wife as witnesses and half the town in attendance. News of their story had spread, and people loved a romance with a happy ending. Abigail wore her best dress, the one she'd brought from Boston, thinking she'd wear it for a man who'd abandoned her. Instead, she wore it for a man who'd chosen her, who'd fought for her, who loved her not despite her brokenness, but with full knowledge of it. Cole wore his Sunday best, which wasn't much fancier than his work clothes, but he looked at her like she was wearing silk and diamonds. When the minister asked if he took this woman, his "I do" rang out strong and certain, a promise that echoed in the rafters. And when it was her turn, when she said those same words, she meant them with everything she was. This was her choice, her future, her life finally beginning. They rode back to the ranch as husband and wife, the sunset painting the prairie in shades of gold and pink. Everything looked different now, not just beautiful, but meaningful, because it was theirs. Their land, their home, their future stretching out before them like the endless grass. As they crested the final rise and the ranch came into view, Cole pulled his horse to a stop. Abigail did the same, looking at him questioningly. "What is it?" He smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. "Just wanted to remember this moment, bringing my wife home for the first time." Wife. The word sent warmth flooding through her. "Our home," she corrected gently. "Our home," he agreed. "Our life. Everything we build from here. It's ours together." They rode down to the ranch hand in hand, the horses walking close enough that their legs brushed. Tom Harris emerged from the barn, grinning when he saw them. "About time you two got back. I was starting to think you'd run off to California or something." Then he saw their joined hands, the way they looked at each other, and his grin widened. "Well now, guess congratulations are in order?" "They are," Cole confirmed. "Tom Harris, meet my wife, Abigail Turner." Abigail Turner, her new name, her new identity. Not the abandoned orphan, not the desperate mail-order bride, but a woman who'd chosen her own path, who'd fought for her own happiness, who'd found love in the most unexpected place. That night, in the house that was now truly hers, Abigail stood at the window looking out at the stars. She heard Cole come up behind her, felt his arms wrap around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, a hint of teasing in his voice, but real vulnerability underneath. "Not even close." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I was just thinking about that letter, the one from Mason telling me not to come. I've spent days cursing that letter, hating it for what it did to me. But now?" She shook her head in wonder. "Now I think maybe it was the best thing that ever happened to me." "How do you figure?" "Because it brought me here. To you. If he hadn't sent it, if I'd arrived and married him like I planned, I'd be miserable right now. Living a lie with a criminal, never knowing what real love felt like." She touched his face, memorizing every line, every feature. I thought that letter destroyed my future, but really, it gave me one. Cole kissed her softly, a kiss full of promise and new beginnings. Then I guess I owe Mason Blake a thank you, even if the bastard doesn't deserve it. She laughed, the sound free and genuine. Don't you dare. They stood there together, wrapped in each other and the quiet of the prairie night. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the smell of sage and earth and home. And inside, two hearts that had been broken and lost had found each other, had chosen each other, had built something beautiful from the wreckage of failed dreams. This was how love happened sometimes, not in the careful plans and arranged meetings, not in advertisements and letters written by strangers, but in the unexpected kindness of a man who couldn't walk away from someone in need, in the courage of a woman who refused to stay broken, in the choice to fight for something worth having, even when it scared you. Abigail had come to Hollow Bend expecting one kind of future and found another entirely. She'd been abandoned by a man who saw her as worthless, only to be claimed by a man who saw her as priceless. She'd thought she was coming to Oklahoma to fulfill someone else's dream, but instead she'd discovered her own. And that dream was standing here with his arms around her, promising her tomorrow and every day after, promising her a home and a partnership and a love that would weather whatever storms came their way. She'd come here to be someone's wife, and she'd succeeded, just not in any way she could have imagined. She was Mrs. Abigail Turner now, and she was finally home. The first weeks of marriage brought changes that neither of them had fully anticipated. The house that had been Cole's solitary domain for 5 years transformed into something alive with shared rhythms, morning coffee made together, meals prepared side by side, evenings spent in conversation rather than silence. Abigail found herself learning the particular language of ranch life, the way weather dictated everything, how the cattle had their own patterns and personalities, how the land itself seemed to breathe with the seasons. She established a small sewing corner by the window in the main room where the light was best and began taking in work from neighboring ranches and the few families scattered across the territory. Word spread quickly that Cole Turner's new wife had magic in her fingers when it came to mending and alterations. The extra income was modest but steady, and more than that, it gave Abigail a sense of contributing, of building their future together with her own skills. But peace, they were learning, was a fragile thing in this territory. It was a Tuesday morning, nearly 6 weeks after their wedding, when the rider came. Abigail was in the garden, coaxing late-season vegetables from the stubborn earth, when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her heart sink when she recognized Tom Harris's youngest son, barely 16, riding like the devil himself was chasing him. Cole emerged from the barn at the same moment, his face already shifting into that alert wariness she'd come to recognize as his response to trouble. "Billy? What's wrong?" The boy pulled up hard, his horse lathered and breathing heavy. "Mr. Turner, Pa sent me. There's riders coming. A lot of them. 20, maybe more. They're burning homesteads as they go, running folks off their claims. Pa says they'll be here by nightfall, maybe sooner." Abigail felt ice slide down her spine. "Who are they?" "Cattlemen from up north, Pa thinks. Big outfit that doesn't like settlers claiming open range." Billy's eyes were wide with fear. "They already hit the Brennans, burned their wagons, scattered their livestock. Mrs. Brennan and the kids are at our place now, but Pa says it's not safe to stay. Says everyone needs to either run or make a stand." Cole's expression had gone hard as granite. "How many families are left between here and the Harris place?" "Maybe 6, 7. Most are packing up, heading to town, but some are talking about fighting." Billy looked at Cole with the desperate hope of youth seeking guidance from someone stronger. "What should we do, Mr. Turner?" Abigail watched her husband's face, saw him calculating, weighing options. She knew what he was thinking, the same thing she was. They could run, pack what they could carry, and flee to Hollow Bend or beyond. Wait for the danger to pass. It would be the safe choice, the smart choice. But this was their home, their life, everything they'd fought for. "You tell your pa I'm coming," Cole said finally. "Tell him to gather anyone willing to make a stand at his place. It's the most defensible position. We'll fort up there, protect what's ours." "Cole," Abigail started, but he was already moving. "Billy, ride on. We'll be right behind you." As the boy galloped off, Cole turned to Abigail, his eyes intense. I need you to pack essentials, food, ammunition, medical supplies if we have them. Enough for a few days. We're really going to fight them? Her voice was steadier than she felt. We're going to defend our neighbors, our home, our right to be here. He gripped her shoulders. I won't force you into this. If you want to go to town, wait this out somewhere safe. We've had this conversation before, she cut him off. I'm not leaving you. I'm not hiding while you face danger. We're in this together, remember? Something fierce and proud flashed in his eyes. Together, he agreed, always together. They worked with practiced efficiency, loading the wagon with supplies, securing the house as best they could. Cole gathered his rifles, checked his ammunition, his face set in those hard lines she'd seen in Guthrie. But this was different, she realized. This wasn't about protecting her specifically. This was about protecting a way of life, about standing up to those who thought might made right. As they prepared to leave, Abigail found herself pausing at the threshold of their home, looking back at the space that had become so precious to her in such a short time. The table where they ate breakfast, the chair where Cole read in the evenings, the bedroom where they'd built a life together, all of it at risk now, threatened by men who saw this land as theirs simply because they'd been here first, because they had the guns and numbers to enforce their will. We'll come back to it, Cole said quietly beside her. I promise you that. She wanted to believe him, but as they rode toward the Harris Ranch, passing abandoned homesteads and seeing smoke on the horizon from fires already set, she wondered if promises meant anything against this kind of violence. The Harris place was organized chaos when they arrived. Perhaps 15 people had gathered, mostly men, but a few women too, including Sarah Brennan, her face set in determined lines despite the fear in her eyes. Tom Harris was coordinating defenses, positioning people at windows and behind barriers. Turner, thank God. Harris gripped Cole's hand. We're outgunned and outnumbered, but maybe we can hold them off long enough to make them think twice about tangling with us again. What exactly do they want? Cole asked, helping unload supplies from the wagon. Our land, simple as that. It was Sarah who answered, her voice bitter. There's a consortium of big cattlemen up north. They've been buying up range, pushing out small operators. Now they're moving on settlers, anyone who's claimed land they think should be open for their herds. They don't care about legal claims or territorial law. They've got the guns, so they make the rules. Not anymore, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see the sheriff from Guthrie, Dawson, flanked by 3 deputies. Territorial Marshal's office got wind of what's happening. We've been tracking these raiders for 2 weeks. Hope flickered in Abigail's chest. You're here to stop them? We're here to try. Dawson's face was grim. But they've got numbers, we don't. Best we can do is be here when they arrive, make it clear this isn't lawless territory anymore. Sometimes that's enough to make men think twice. Sometimes it's not. The waiting was the worst part. They spent the afternoon fortifying the Harris home, piling furniture against windows, preparing positions, checking weapons over and over. The women worked in the kitchen, preparing food that might sustain them through a siege. Children were sent to the cellar with one of Harris's daughters to watch over them, their frightened faces a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. Abigail found herself standing watch at an upper window, a rifle in her hands that she'd learned to use in the weeks since Guthrie. Cole had taught her, patient and thorough, until she could hit a target more often than not. She'd never imagined actually having to shoot at a person, though. The thought made her stomach turn. Cole came up behind her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. You don't have to be here. You could go to the cellar with the children. And leave you up here alone? She turned to face him. No, we stand together, remember? He pulled her close, and she felt the tension in his body, the coiled readiness for violence. If it comes to shooting, aim for the horses first if you can. Easier target, and it stops them without killing. But Abigail, his voice dropped lower. If it's you or them, you don't hesitate. You understand? She nodded against his chest, not trusting her voice. They came as the sun was setting, silhouetted against the orange sky like something out of a nightmare. 23 riders by Abigail's count, maybe more. They approached slowly, deliberately, making no attempt to hide their numbers or intentions. At their head rode a man who carried himself like a general surveying a battlefield he'd already won. Sheriff Dawson stepped out onto the porch, his badge glinting in the dying light. That's far enough. This is Sheriff Dawson of Guthrie. You men are in violation of territorial law. Turn back now, and we'll call this a misunderstanding. The lead rider laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Territorial law doesn't run out here, Sheriff. We do. These people are squatting on open range, and we're here to move them along. You'd be smart to step aside. Can't do that. Dawson's voice carried across the yard. These folks have legal claims, properly filed and registered. You burn them out, you're committing arson and assault. I've got 4 lawmen here and about 15 armed citizens. You want to test us, that's your choice. But some of you won't right away. A tense silence fell. Abigail could see the riders shifting, weighing their options. They'd probably expected to face frightened settlers, easy to scatter. Finding law and organized resistance had clearly not been part of their plan. The lead rider's eyes scanned the house, counting guns and windows, assessing the fortifications. Abigail held her breath, her finger near the trigger, praying he'd choose to back down. You're making a mistake, Sheriff, the man said finally. The Cattlemen's Association won't forget this. Neither will the Territorial Marshal's office. Dawson's voice was steel. And I promise you, they've got longer memories and more patience than you do. Now move along before someone gets hurt over something as stupid as pride. For a long moment, it could have gone either way. Then the lead rider spat into the dust, yanked his horse's head around, and started back the way he'd come. His men followed, some reluctant, some clearly relieved. They disappeared into the gathering dark, leaving only dust and the echo of hoofbeats. Nobody moved for a full minute. Then Tom Harris let out a whoop, and suddenly everyone was talking at once, the tension breaking like a dam. Dawson came back inside, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. That was too close, he said. They'll be back, maybe not tonight or tomorrow, but they'll be back. You folks need to stay vigilant, maybe think about organizing a proper citizens' watch. We will, Cole said, his arm around Abigail's waist. And Sheriff? Thank you. Your being here made the difference. After the danger passed, they stayed at the Harris place that night, too exhausted and shaken to make the journey home in the dark. Families huddled together, sharing food and stories, the near miss bringing them closer in a way only shared danger could. Sarah Brennan found Abigail in a quiet corner, both of them too wound up to sleep. You held steady up there, Sarah said quietly. Not everyone could have done that. I was terrified. We all were. But you didn't run. That's what counts. Sarah looked toward where her children slept in the cellar. You know what Jacob said to me when we decided to come out here? He said the frontier wasn't a place, it was a choice. Every day you choose to stay, to fight, to build something worth keeping. You and Cole, you made that choice today. The next morning, they rode back to their ranch with a group of neighbors, safety in numbers. The relief Abigail felt seeing their house still standing, untouched by the violence that had threatened, was overwhelming. Everything was exactly as they'd left it, but somehow it felt more precious now, more clearly theirs because they'd fought to keep it. The weeks that followed brought changes. The settlers organized, forming a proper watch system, agreeing to support each other against future threats. Cole took a leadership role, his natural authority and level-headedness making him someone others looked to for guidance. Abigail found herself hosting meetings, feeding groups of men who gathered to plan defenses and coordinate patrols. Their life took on new dimensions, no longer just the two of them building a home, but part of a larger community, connected to neighbors through shared struggle and mutual protection. It was exhausting and sometimes frightening, but it was also deeply satisfying. They were building something bigger than themselves, creating a place where people could make lives and raise families without fear. It was nearly 3 months after their wedding when Abigail realized she'd missed her monthly courses. At first, she dismissed it. The stress of the raid, the changes in her life, any number of things could cause such disruption. But when another week passed and she woke feeling nauseated, when certain smells suddenly became unbearable, she knew. She was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with a complex mixture of joy and fear, a child, their child, growing inside her. The future made tangible in a way she'd never imagined. But also, a child born into this hard land, this dangerous territory where raiders could come at any moment, where survival was never guaranteed. She told Cole that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they'd developed, their quiet time together before the day fully ended. She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach, and said simply, "We're going to have a baby." He went completely still, his eyes searching her face as if trying to determine if he'd heard correctly. "A baby? You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor, but yes, I'm sure." Joy broke across his face like sunrise, pure and radiant. He pulled her into his arms, held her like she was made of glass. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." She felt tears on her cheeks, happy ones this time. "Are you pleased?" "Pleased?" He laughed, the sound choked with emotion. "Abigail, I don't even have words. This is—" He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "This is everything. You're everything. And now we're going to have a child, a family. I never thought I'd have this. Never thought I'd be this happy." They sat there together as the sun painted the sky in impossible colors, talking about the future in concrete terms now. Names they might choose, how they'd convert the small storage room into a nursery, whether they should try to get a doctor out from Guthrie when the time came. Making plans, building dreams, creating the life they both wanted. But reality intruded 2 days later when Tom Harris arrived with news that made Cole's face go hard. The Cattlemen's Association filed a claim with the territorial government. They're saying all this land is rightfully theirs, that our claims are invalid. They've got lawyers, money, influence. They're fighting us legal now, instead of with guns. "Can they do that?" Abigail asked, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. "They can try," Cole said, "but we filed our claims proper, followed every regulation. We've got law on our side." "Law doesn't always win against money," Harris said grimly. "I've seen it before. They'll drag it through courts, tie it up in paperwork, make it so expensive to fight that folks give up and leave." "Then we don't give up," Cole said with quiet determination. "We pool our resources, hire a lawyer of our own. We fight them in court the same way we face them down with guns, together." Over the next weeks, the community organized in new ways. They took up a collection, everyone contributing what they could afford, and some giving more than they should have been able to spare. They hired a lawyer from Guthrie, a young man named Patterson, who believed in territorial law and the rights of settlers. He began the long process of defending their claims, filing countersuits, building a case. Abigail threw herself into helping however she could. She organized fundraisers, sewed items to sell in town, used her growing skill with letters and documents to help Patterson prepare his filings. She was sick most mornings now, the baby making its presence known, but she worked through it with stubborn determination. Cole watched her with a mixture of pride and concern. One evening, after she'd spent the entire day helping Patterson organize land claims, he pulled her aside. "You need to rest more. The baby needs a home to be born into," she said firmly. "I'm not going to sit idle while our future is decided by lawyers and cattlemen. This child deserves to inherit a world where right matters more than might, where hard work and legal claims mean something." He couldn't argue with that, so instead he made sure she ate properly, that she got sleep when her body demanded it, that she never lifted anything heavier than a pen. His protectiveness had intensified with the knowledge of her pregnancy, but it was a gentler thing now, expressed in small acts of care rather than trying to shield her from the world. The legal battle dragged on through winter. Snow came to the prairie, transforming the landscape into something both beautiful and brutal. They celebrated Christmas with their neighbors, a modest affair but rich with community and hope. Abigail was showing now, her condition obvious, and the women surrounded her with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, the kind of practical support that meant more than any fancy gift. It was in early February when Patterson arrived with news. The Cattlemen's Association's claim had been rejected. The territorial judge had ruled in favor of the settlers, declaring their claims legal and binding. It wasn't a complete victory. The cattlemen could appeal, could try again through different channels, but it was a significant win, proof that law could triumph over intimidation. The celebration that night at the Harris place was jubilant. Music, dancing, food shared freely. Abigail, now 6 months pregnant and moving carefully, found herself pulled into the revelry. Cole kept a protective hand on her back, But even he couldn't stop smiling, the tension of months finally easing. Sarah Brennan raised a glass. To the future? To building something worth keeping, to all of us who chose to stay and fight. To the future, everyone echoed, and Abigail felt the baby kick as if in agreement, a flutter of movement that made her gasp and laugh. Cole felt it too, his hand on her stomach. Strong one, he said, wonder in his voice. Just like the mother. Spring came gradually, the prairie transforming from brown to green, wildflowers painting the grass in splashes of color. Abigail was huge now, uncomfortable and awkward, but radiant with impending motherhood. She'd finished preparing the nursery, had stocked it with everything they might need. The community had rallied around them, and hardly a day went by without someone stopping by with a gift or offer of help. She was sitting on the porch one afternoon, resting her swollen ankles, when she saw the rider approaching. Her heart jumped. She was always nervous about unexpected visitors now, but as he got closer, she recognized Sheriff Dawson. He dismounted, tipped his hat. "Mrs. Turner, is Cole around?" "In the barn. Is something wrong?" "Actually, no. Something's right for a change." Dawson smiled. "Wanted to tell you both in person. Garrett Sutton's been arrested. Turns out he was involved in some illegal land schemes up north. He'll be in prison for a good long while. And Mason Blake, he made a deal with the prosecutor, agreed to testify against Sutton in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's in the territorial prison, but he'll be out in a few years with good behavior." Abigail absorbed this news, feeling a strange sense of closure. "So it's really over? All of it?" "All of it," Dawson confirmed. "Figured you deserved to know, after everything you went through." Cole emerged from the barn, and Dawson repeated the news. They thanked him, invited him to stay for dinner, but he declined, needing to get back to Guthrie. As he rode away, Abigail leaned against Cole, his arm around her shoulders. "It's hard to believe," she said quietly, "that all of that, Mason, Sutton, the danger, it all started less than a year ago. Feels like a lifetime." "It was a lifetime," Cole said. "Our old lives ended, and this one began." He placed his hand on her stomach, feeling their child move beneath his palm. "And it keeps getting better." The baby came on a warm night in late April, arriving with the kind of speed that left everyone slightly stunned. The midwife Sarah had arranged barely arrived in time. Cole paced outside until Sarah finally took pity on him and let him in, and he held Abigail's hand through the final pushes, murmuring encouragement and love. Their daughter was born just after midnight, arriving with a lusty cry that announced her presence to the world. She was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and eyes that would probably be the same storm gray as her father's. "She's beautiful," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion as he held his daughter for the first time. "Perfect, just like her mother." They named her Hope. It seemed fitting, a child born from the ashes of Abigail's abandoned dreams, from the courage to choose a different path, from the love that had grown in the most unexpected soil. Hope Turner, their daughter, their future made flesh. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming joy. Abigail discovered depths of love she hadn't known existed, watching Cole with their daughter, seeing the fierce tenderness in his eyes as he held her. The community rallied around them, helping with the ranch work so Cole could spend time with his new family, bringing food and gifts and advice. It was late summer when another significant change came. The territorial government, perhaps influenced by the settlers' legal victory and growing political pressure, announced new protections for homesteaders. The Cattlemen's Association was officially barred from challenging legitimate claims. Their land, their home, their future, all of it was secure now, protected by law and precedent. Cole and Abigail stood on their porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the prairie gold. Hope was asleep in her cradle inside, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there were no threats on the horizon, no dangers lurking, no fights to fight. "Do you ever think about it?" Abigail asked quietly. "That day on the platform? How different everything could have been." Cole pulled her closer. "Every day. I think about how close I came to riding past that station, how easily I could have minded my own business and left you there." "Why didn't you?" "Because you looked like you needed help, and I was raised to be the kind of man who gives it." He kissed the top of her head. "Best decision I ever made, stopping that day. Changed my whole life. Changed both our lives." She turned to face him, this man who'd saved her in more ways than one, who'd shown her what love and partnership really meant. I came here expecting to marry a stranger, to build a life based on necessity and desperation. Instead, I found you, found home, found everything I didn't know I was searching for. We found each other, Cole corrected. And we built this together, the home, the life, the family, all of it together. Inside, Hope began to fuss, and they both smiled, that particular expression of new parents who still marveled at every sound their child made. As they went inside together, Abigail felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her, for the letter that had devastated her, for the platform where she'd stood abandoned, for Cole's voice cutting through her despair with 7 simple words that had changed everything. She'd come to Oklahoma Territory broken and alone, believing she had nothing left to lose. But she'd been wrong. She'd had everything to gain: a husband who loved her, a daughter who was their greatest joy, a home they'd fought to keep, a community they'd helped build, a future that stretched out bright and full of promise. The woman who'd stood on that platform clutching a crumpled letter would barely recognize the woman she'd become. Stronger, braver, more certain of her own worth and capabilities. A wife, a mother, a fighter, a builder of futures. All of it earned, all of it chosen, all of it hers. As night fell over the prairie, the Turner family settled into their evening routine. Cole rocked Hope while Abigail prepared for bed, the simple domestic scene a testament to how far they'd come. Outside, the land stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars, the same stars that had witnessed an abandoned woman and a kind-hearted cowboy finding each other in the midst of heartbreak and uncertainty. "Cole," Abigail said softly as he placed Hope in her cradle, "do you remember what you said to me that first day? He left you here? Then you're coming home with me." "I remember. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I was unworthy of it. You gave me a future when mine had been destroyed." She took his hand, held it tight. "But more than that, you gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be. Not someone's obligation or burden, but a partner, an equal, someone who matters." Cole pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You always mattered, Abigail. From the first moment I saw you, you mattered, and you always will." They stood there in the quiet of their home, their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, the life they'd built together surrounding them like a fortress made of love and determination. Outside, the prairie wind sang its eternal song, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. This was what redemption looked like, Abigail thought. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but the quiet accumulation of days well lived, of choices made with courage, of love given and received freely. This was what it meant to be home. Not a place on a map, but the feeling of belonging so completely to someone and something that you couldn't imagine being anywhere else. She'd been left on a platform under a dying sun, holding a letter that meant nothing, but a cowboy had spoken words that changed her life forever. And in choosing to trust him, in choosing to stay, in choosing to fight for the life they could build together, she'd found more than she'd ever dared to dream. She'd found herself. She'd found love. She'd found home. And that, she knew with absolute certainty, was worth every moment of fear, every tear shed, every battle fought. This life, this love, this family, it was everything. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was perfect. As they climbed into bed that night, Cole pulled her close one more time. "I love you, Abigail Turner." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Thank you for bringing me home. Thank you for saying yes, for staying, for building this life with me." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, challenges or triumphs, struggles or celebrations, they would face it together, always together. And on the prairie, under a ceiling of stars that had witnessed the beginning of their story, the wind carried their dreams into the future, where hope would grow strong and loved, where their legacy would take root and flourish, where the choice one cowboy made to help a stranded woman would echo through generations. Because sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is simple kindness offered at the right moment.